So, I've compressed roughly 7 years of lore into an hour. Given the amount to cover in the allotted time frame, you can imagine things might get a little dense. In attempting to be as thorough as possible, I'll be deferring to the original script over the localizations. I'll address some of the major differences and throw out notes when such conflicts occur. There's also this nifty timeline I made that should help with placement, because no, they're not always in order. That would be too easy. So let's get into it. We start in an alternate version of our world, similar but with some different names. This gets called the Alpha timeline. It's the early 1900s, just assume history up to this point is roughly the same as ours. But everything changed when a magic space rock arrived. Everybody likes magic space rocks. Moving ahead to the Cold War, there's a scramble to the meteor site. Shortly after, in the Eagle Union, a clean, infinite power source known as energy cubes are revealed. This technology is so great it replaces pretty much everything and people lose their jobs. That's sad, but the factory must grow. Some time goes by and cubes get adopted into everyday life. The Cold War continues onward until we roughly reach the modern day. Eventually, one Dr. Ansel realizes cubes can do more than be a fancy space-efficient power source. Focusing on its information storage capabilities, the Wisdom Cube is created. Wisdom Cubes can give form to an idea or a concept. From this, we get the first ship girl, or Canton. They name her Koji, but Enterprise is probably the better known name. Canton are the result of taking a history and smashing it into a cube. This information forms the basis of their whole. So long as that information is not altered, a ship will have a fixed appearance, never changing or aging. While superficially similar to humans, they can eat things a human can't. Without her rigging, she's stated to be similar enough to a normal human, physically. But with her rigging, Enterprise has the strength, durability, and capabilities of a real aircraft carrier. Unlike a real carrier, she has the advantage of being small, agile, and able to dodge missiles. Simply put, they are really scary and render traditional warfare obsolete overnight. There are some problems though. The most concerning, they aren't viewed as people. That they are very OP, no doubt contributes. Some attempts to fix this happen. The Navy appoints one Bonhomme Richard as a PR rep. She burns some people on the internet and gets to a B-tier 80s movie, but that doesn't seem to fix things, oddly enough. Around this point, an alternate AI project, Antiochus or Antiochus, is underway by an associate of Dr. Ansel, Dr. Oust, because AI is so much less likely to rebel and kill everything. If the name's a bit confusing, blame Oust. He wanted them to counter some imaginary threat, so Antiochus. Then something actually showed up, so X. Oust and Ansel make a lot of discoveries and become pretty well known. During an experiment off Bermuda, the Federation's Division 13 creates a black cube. Everyone exposed to it simply goes insane. That includes Richard. She experiences a metamorphosis or a meta event. Certain elements can change a wisdom cube, starting as decay into that black cube called an origin cube. Typically, this is seen as a corrosive effect that grants increased power with the risk of losing oneself only becoming a concern past a certain point. But something else seems to have gotten to her, causing her to go insane, destroying everything around her via evil black tornado. Richard gets in a fight, is assumed sunk, and leaves behind an origin cube called Pandora, which immediately starts driving people insane, forcing the captain of the USS Enterprise to sacrifice himself in order to ensure it's destroyed. Panic over cube technology resurfaces, Ansel gets arrested, relationships between the two superpowers takes a nosedive, and things are about to get a lot worse. It starts with the Colossus Demon, a time-jumping device developed by Oust. For the two superpowers, this escalates the already very volatile situation. The Revolutionary Front decides to steal it for themselves, but the Oceanic Federation sets up a trap. Meanwhile, the doctors want Koji and her group Flare to steal it so everyone can take a deep breath and hopefully not start World War III. That doesn't happen because everything goes wrong. The fact that researching the device caused erratic, evil-looking black weather and apparent hallucinations should have been a red flag. As humanity fights over it in this weakened space, the conflict draws in something terrible. The name X is given to it. The nature of such an entity isn't like an all-consuming metallic slime. Even when blown apart, they just form into smaller ones and reform endlessly, corrupting, consuming, repurposing, and mimicking everything it comes into contact with, thus giving them their designations as mimics. Its very nature extends from a higher plane of existence, and as a conceptual entity, merely knowing about it is enough to let it in, and like Pandora's box, it's a door that can't be closed. So the war begins, and humanity is desperate. Meta is found to be reversible, so long as a cancer does not cross the point of no return. So they begin using methods to limit the progression of meta to a reversible state in order to make use of that power boost. The United Council is formed to lead the war effort, and a Project Dawn is conceived by Dr. Sofia Alexeyevna Grushkova, a Northern Parliament researcher and associate of Ansel and Oust. but the Council's 5th Fleet with Princeton and her get caught in a space-time anomaly and are stranded, unable to find a way back to their world. Without its creator, Project Dawn gets dropped and is repurposed into a program which seems to have gone from whatever the original goal was into passing the torch. With the construction of the new Arbiter units, Anti-X becomes the cornerstone of the Council's fleet as the final battle approaches. At some time, Meta also started becoming a problem rather than a solution. It's also known a weapon using Watasumi was devised, then was prevented from being used. The Kansen put up a final, desperate effort. X has a known tendency to prioritize leaders, ignoring other units, even Kansen, to eliminate their target. At the defense of New York, Ansel notes her broadcasts have marked her for elimination, and acts as bait for the evacuation. Enterprise blames Anti-X for not sending reinforcements and attempts to confront Oust over Ansel's death. Zero turns her away, and so the end of this world arrives. However, Oust won't let it end there. Facing his end, he concludes that his greatest mistake was kindness, that there was no way they could win with the little power they had, that only through the pressure of constant evolution could one capable of defeating them be made. He calls out to Zero and orders her to enact the Magister's plan, to look for the conditions to awakening, something Ansel theorized but never managed to figure out. He leaves humanity's fate to her. Zero begins, using Laplace's demon, Antiochus travel across time and split off many different branches, starting roughly around the time of the meteor. They then use these as test grounds for the goal of defeating X, unfortunately burning through an untold number of timelines with very little to show for it other than some more enemies in the forms of new metas. The survivors of Flare, now the Ashes, point out this kinda looks like mass genocide and they start fighting each other. Something worth noting is that there are no alternate Richards. There's only one of her. Duplicate metas existing at the same time doesn't seem to be too common either. Various, sometimes familiar events occur across these branches, but we see the introduction of cube technology in these worlds. No energy cubes, but wisdom cubes arrive alongside the first Kansen. Nobody really seems to know where it came from, nor understand it, but it seems to conveniently arrive shortly after these sirens. No link, I'm sure. Regardless, humanity fights back against the sirens, and we see the formation of Azur Lane. In this branch, referred to as Test Site Beta, Azur Lane finds the perfect person to lead their ship girls. He has an unrivaled affinity for wisdom cubes and is quickly enrolled in a naval academy for training. We will later call him the Commander. Their past, deleted by AL Command. If that's not weird enough, this academy was previously associated with cube development. But either way, training. During said training, he's sent to the Soccer Empire as representative of the academy, and the risk begins. There's a lot going on here, between the withering Sakura trees and Shinano's damaged cube. Nagato, Musashi, and the mysterious Great Sage meet at the Great Sanctuary to address this. A time ago, a meteorite called Watasumi fell here, and darkness followed, like the other side of its light. The Prime Sakura that supports the many sacred Sakura trees around the Empire grew around it, and Watasumi sealed the darkness within. But Watasumi's now out of power, and the seal is failing. They enter the barrier to purge it, the Great Sage planning to sacrifice herself. Nagato asks about Watasumi, and Miss GS tells us it's not any different from our wisdom cubes, just all natural. She is the spirit of Watasumi, and her fate is tied to it, along with Leviathan. Nagato takes damage to her cube from the monster, and Nagato and Musashi wake up outside, unable to re-enter the barrier. Nagato enters a lesser Sakura tree to heal. Musashi studies what the Great Sage gave her, creating a copy of Watasumi to repair Shinano's wisdom cube, and Yamato has Shinano sent away to a remote island to rest. Meanwhile, a version of the Washington Naval Treaty is signed, and there's a big exercise held on Nagato's orders to determine her replacement as flagship while she's healing. The result? Akagi and Kaga are converted to carriers. Amagi was originally going to be the one converted, but she allows Kaga to take her place due to damaged wisdom cube and poor health. Worth mentioning, while Tosa is implied to have been scrapped, that doesn't mean she dies, just increased vacation days. Amagi, however, seems to pass away. Akagi takes this hard. While Kaga technically is supposed to be the one in charge, it really becomes Akagi's show. Meanwhile, Ironblood, having gone through a long, complicated series of unfortunate events, begins wanting power. It just so happens the Sirens are dealing. The rest of Azur Lane isn't too keen on this. Relations don't great at this point anyway, so they leave and form the Crimson Axis. Sardinia once in, the Irish Orthodoxy less so, but Ironblood are very persuasive, and the Irish debate the effectiveness of German engineering so hard they break in two. The Royal Navy wants in on this debate, and they give out a deadly stroke. Clemenceau, in charge of the French CIA, wants Richelieu out of this mess, so she is sent to the Royal Navy and begins laying the groundwork for unification. Sometime after that, she meets Marco Polo. Sardinia tries some power moves, but unfortunately they're playing as Italy, so they only roll natural ones. Bismarck and her trusty assistant, Friedrich the Grosse, haven't forgotten that the main objective of obtaining power was to beat the Sirens. So they begin making plans. Bismarck takes the Sirens' power and becomes their guinea pig, not expecting to survive. Red takes over while Bismarck goes to bite bullets. Using that power, Bismarck severely wounds Hood. The elite Siren Observer Alpha, who is in charge of this branch, gives her a black cube and puts her against the entire Royal Navy. Bismarck then proceeds to get absolutely wasted after failing to control it, but is saved by U-556. Feeling left out, the Soccer Empire decides to join in and declares war on Azur Lane after attacking them. For slightly better news, the commander's now in charge. The early timeline here mostly follows ours, Coral Sea, Midway, etc. Akagi pulls out all the stops at Midway, but someone stops her before she'd regret it. Lexington and Yorktown take damage to their wisdom cubes after contamination from all that seeps into their wounds, and they end up bedridden. Sirens do siren things. Let's talk about that now. Reenactment. It's not a term that exists in CN, being a JP edition. The Sirens do have a script for this test site, and Observer even gave it out to Akagi and Freddy in secret. But it gets used really inconsistently in the wrong places by the wrong people, with the localizers not even seeming to know what their own term means. So it's better to pretend it doesn't exist, honestly. Nonetheless, it is the past, so early events naturally line up with history as we know it, before becoming increasingly separate the longer we go on. Some of these events are relevant, most aren't. But events start to diverge. It starts with Soikaku stumbling into Akagi's mess and gets a little concerned that Kagi and Kaga aren't dead and are doing some rather questionable things with help from the tentacle people. Mikasa, Zoikaku, and Shokaku go get Nagato, who also isn't too keen on all this warmongering and the weak stuff. Nagato is apprehensive to join them at first because she's worried about her job being inside a tree and all, but Grandma's persistent and wants Nagato to go play outside for once. Nagato joins them and they form the Reborn Combined Fleet as a counter against the Kagi. Sirens show up, but who cares? Across the pond, the Eagles send the fleet to investigate a suspicious signal. They find a bunch of Sirens destroyed by their own tech. They decide to continue on, inadvertently walking into a Siren ambush. But they get saved by Koji, who they recognize as Enterprise. Turns out, Dark Inti is curious about the commander. Both sides are somewhat suspicious of the other. They get nowhere. Enterprise leaves. Observer Zero, who is the Siren in charge of Antiochus operations, doesn't seem too keen on the Ashes messing around in their backyard. How's Europe doing? Massachusetts beats John Butt to a pulp? That's probably not fine. She orders everyone to sink, but no one's really interested. Marseille takes an artifact called the Crown of the Holy See and runs. Richie takes a vacation to Africa with the Royal Navy. That's nice. Algerie pulls a black cube. Was nice. Weird religious stuff. Itchy is working on a skybound wall. Ironblood is up to something. Duke of York has a date with Scharnhorst. The Royal Navy uses turf as target practice. Vicky gets mad she won't come out and play with her. This is all... Oh, here we go. Edgy shows up, tries to open up a singularity, almost blows up the Northern Parliament, and just leaves. Doesn't elaborate. They fight Purifier and we learn that Koji was the prototype used to make the Sirens. Back in Freedom Land, it's under attack. The Sirens show up with a massive assault on NY. Tester and Purifier are there. Enterprise shows up, seemingly working with the Sirens. The Eagles beat them back and stage a counter-offensive into the Bermuda, leaving the Singularity there to be a Siren forward operating base. No Sirens, but there are some weird Kansan puppets. As this goes on, the commander begins to experience memories and voices, and it's not even 3 AM yet. One of which is Dr. Antil being arrested after the whole... Eventually, Enterprise meets her significantly more depressed alter ego, who accuses her and the rest of Azur Lane of being just puppets controlled by Antiochus. She refers to the commander as the Key, and reveals the attack was just a ploy to get them to meet. A meta version of Takao interrupts them. She stalls them a bit, making remarks about how this unique timeline was hidden by Antiochus. She gets a little carried away though and attacks the commander. Metaprise stops her, and they leave again, having accomplished the goal of laying down beacons. As this timeline was hidden, it both exposes the timeline and acts as a way in. Observer Zero knows that having such an access point is unacceptable and orders one of her arbiters, Empress III, to act. Going back to the Soccer Empire, they start a ritual. This involves Watasumi, whose power can grant forms to ships, even if they never existed. They want to use it to wake Shinano, who is a sleepyhead. Ironblood is invited and Prince shows up. She gets drunk, Scions crash the party, and Observer Alpha tries to steal it, but Takao Meta crashes her party crashing attempt. Claiming the stone to be a calamity, she tries to destroy it only for it to be a fake. The real thing ends up being given to Eugen by Akagi. Ironblood wants it so they can spam more paper ships. Shinano chooses an interesting time to wake up. As her treatment gave Shinano a link to Watasumi, she gets the Great Sage's Dream Sight power. This is a result of the Wisdom Cube network, an information space that all cubes are connected to. It's a higher dimensional space discovered by the Doctors from which vast amounts of information flows into and out of. It's also the base of the Siren's natural calculation system, which is used to simulate possible futures when combined with Laplace's demon and information from the cube network. When involved, you often hear... Falling asleep, she dreams of these other worlds. One where she is ambushed and sunk by Tester, One where Akagi pulls a black cube, one where it shows the fight with the Leviathans, one where she was experiencing her sinking as a warship, and one where the various factions exist together in peace. Shinano also learns the importance of this commander figure. Waking from her dream, she recognizes the signs that she's living in her first dream. She uses this knowledge to thwart Tester's ambush. Akagi gets mad at Alpha for interfering in internal affairs and swears vengeance. Alpha and co-workers then gather to discuss the arrival of 3 arbiters in our timeline, and I'm sure nothing bad will come out of letting these two meet. While this is going on, the Eagle Union gets attacked again. Enterprise sees things, Observer isn't happy with her boss, and the commander leaves for the Northern Parliament. They need his help with the Sirens. It doesn't take long before they start to find out why the Northern Parliament wasn't too keen on asking for help until now, being how they're effectively doing the same thing that got Ironblood in trouble, using Siren tech. The commander does such a good job, he gets to stay. The Royal Navy tries to get him back, but fails conveniently for the Northern Parliament. Thank Ironblood and the Sirens having fun. During which Ironblood takes Scapa Flow. They try again. The Northern Parliament, however, needs the commander to access the Arcana Sanctum, a mirror sea they found under the ocean. They rush him there. What they find is a city of light that shows signs of a desperate defense. The commander recalls memories of Anzil and House making preparations for Antiochus. But they all fall under attack by a dark, indescribable enemy. They hold out and manage to escape with some documents, including one, Project Dawn. On the outside, they are met by a joint EU Royal Navy fleet that takes the commander back. While we're here, let's go back a bit. At some point, roughly here, the Northern Parliament dispatched an expedition team led by Kronstadt. Their objective was to study the site of a meteorite that fell into the ocean near their territory. The Sirens tried to recover it, but it did stuff. Now, where have we heard this? Taking a submarine down, Kron connects to it and is seemingly transported to a tropical island with her team, where they meet a rather friendly character who introduces herself as... They proceed to experience, and is seemingly booted back to this strange thing called real life. Having no idea what happened, Kron decides to go back in again, experiencing the same timeline over and over again, with things getting progressively weirder each time. Richard at the center of it. Eventually, Richard turns openly hostile, attempting to make a Kronstadt meta, and almost succeeds. But at a critical point, a failsafe placed on her wisdom cube activates. Kron witnesses Anzil and her assistant, who recognizes the commander, leaving a message to any Kansan that reached this point. This allows her to regain control. They escape from BHR, but are left stranded on the seafloor, waiting for rescue. With the commander back, the various factions call a ceasefire, and stage a massive attack on the Sirens. Here we meet TB. Yeah, she's not suspicious at all. The various factions have run-ins with the Ashes and Arbiters, who are skirmishing the Atlantic. They make progress, but Operation Siren stalls under bureaucracy. The commander takes the initiative and leads an attack. Getting a meta tracking device from Command, they look at Kiryu meta of the Ashes, who ask how Command got it. And he tries to insist they developed it, but he presses X to doubt. They leave it there. After regrouping, the commander launches the final push in the Siren territory, but they all get drawn into a singularity. Eventually, they team up with Hiryu and Arc Royal meta of the Ashes and force 3 Arbiters, Strength, Hermit, and Temperance, to withdraw. They say goodbye and separate. The commander tries to exchange contacts, but Hiryu already has his number. Ironblood gets into a small bit of trouble around this time, just a small skirmish with Compiler. The Italians get lost in the maze too. Their capital gets attacked, and Freddy moves in. In the Pacific, the commander arrives at Pearl and meets with New Jersey, but has a whole lot of concern about a soccer fleet building up around Midway. The Eagles then proceed to get attacked again. The commander plans a rescue mission, followed by Jersey and Ticonderoga planning a rescue mission for the rescue mission. They stumble into a Siren test site, get lost, Shinano's here, Helena meets her evil twin, everyone meets Helena's evil twin, they all reunite, and there's a fight with Soryu meta. We have Sarah and Jersey talk about investigating some projects from the OG timeline. Where that goes, I don't know, follow up USS events never expand on these endings. And Yorktown 1.5 is here too. I'll finish this event off with some notes for translation errors, cause oh boy. While this is going on, Shimakaze gets lost, finds a castle, and brings it back with her. Getting back to Europe, Ironblood starts building a tower. Not really a tower, though. They want to use it to make a singularity to connect to other worlds. Main objective, find metas. Pretty hush-hush stuff. Oleg reads the fleet through, and they run into some Dragon Emperor ships. It's super awkward, and they won't answer each other's questions, which means nothing is explained. Maybe that weird storm? Talk about that later? Don't know. Ulrich goes in the opposite direction, looking for lost meta ships in need of a home, and finds an injured Gneisenau meta. She's not with the Ashes and has no idea what's going on. She's been fighting here alone for an indescribably long amount of time. She's really not okay and doesn't want to go with them. But a letter from Bismarck helps, and they all decide to go back. They then run into Scharnhorst meta, who is with the Ashes. She tries to take her sister with her, but they're interrupted. Turns out there's an Arbiter here. Scharnhorst helps them, and they regroup. In the downtime, Scharnhorst has an exposition dump, telling them about the target of the Ashes being Observer Zero. They're also looking for Anzil and Oust, I covered this, but they've had little success. Scharnhorst tries to stall the Arbiter but gets knocked out. They save her, dash to the tower, and manage to withdraw. Marco Polo starts plotting. She has a god on her side. The Northern Parliament declares war on Ironblood, and Observer Alpha has some thoughts. Turns out, as the observer of this timeline, losing her job may have adverse effects on her existence. But before the whole war thing can happen, Kron and friends, who are still there by the way, get a rescue. Seems like time was frozen, something that actually happens quite a lot around otherworldly artifacts. Sarah is angry everyone gets to woo the commander of all these secrets, so she sends the commander to the Sea of Stars. We're not really told what happens here, yet, only that the commander was completely shaken by what he saw. Returning from the Sea of Stars, that whole war thing is actually happening. Ironblood is completely and utterly outmatched by the joint Eagle Union Northern Parliament fleets who are leading the charge to recover Scapa Flow. Where's the Royal Navy? Turns out the Royal Navy is in on all this. Friedrich was given the Siren's script to follow along. That was of course never her intention, so she shares it with the Royal Navy and Northern Parliament. They staged the incident at Scapa as cover so they could collaborate on a timeline jumping device based on Midgard named Avalon. Then, Soyuz sent that war message to get everyone involved. With Akagi invited along, the Royal Navy and Ironblood are looking into a tragedy that occurred during the Great War, before the Kansan. An Ironblood fleet was destroyed by the Sirens under divisive circumstances in Scapa Flow. There's a lot that doesn't add up in the aftermath, and they want to know what the Sirens were hiding, so they set Avalon to an alternate branch just after the incident so they can see for themselves. Friedrich decides to ask the ships that were there by turning them into Kansan. Elizabeth gets severely burned. They explain that the Royal Navy and the Ironblood fleets fought together. They retreated into Scapa Flow and were destroyed by a beam of light. They look around a bit before leaving the Singularity and find that Azur Lane is closing in on Scapa Flow rapidly. Of course, Compiler, blissfully unaware, is still following the script and attacks Azur Lane. Friedrich contacts the commander and confirms that she is not working with the Sirens. Another voice comes through. Bismarck. She orders Ironblood to cooperate with Azur Lane, asks for a ceasefire, and declares war against the Sirens. The combined forces engage and destroy Compiler's vessel. They use the Singularity in Scapa Flow to open a passageway to Compiler's mainframe. A Siren mainframe acts as their core that allows them to control their vessels and other subunits. She's got a pretty sick gaming PC set up there. It's a pretty big battle and it looks like they can't win, but Scharnhorst Meta joins in and carries hard, destroying Compiler's terminal. On the verge of shutting down, Compiler recalls three figures discussing her creation, Angel, Oust, and the Commander. We learn Oust has great tastes. She's visited by Helena Meta before she shuts down. Afterwards, Bismarck steps back up as leader of the Ironblood. Freddy just leaves this plane of existence to go join the Ashes. Le Terrible tells Richelieu to obtain the crown of the Holy See. And Marco has another evil scene. I'm incredibly worried for the health of everyone around this madwoman. The Elite Siren has been eliminated, but celebrations are short. Hood still hasn't recovered from the whole getting blown up thing. Actually, she's getting worse, somehow. So they decide to go looking for Royal Navy metas to help with a cure. Conveniently, there's a Singularity in the backyard. Monarch decides she wants to go it alone. Queen Elizabeth leads a team after her. The rest of the Navy is confused as to why shipbuilders are disappearing, and send a group led by Vanguard into the Singularity after them. Arriving at the teleporter, Vanguard finds it's been used twice. Following the first set, they find Repulsed and Renown meta, who are stuck there after getting teleported there by the tower during a fight with the Ashes and the Tygus. Repulsed and Renown are friendly enough, but are really tired of the whole thing. But Vanguard persuades them to uphold the oath and join them. Vanguard and company try the other location. Monarch, after following some coordinates she found in the teleporter, is now having playtime with Richard. Blue Merchants like Monarch have resistance to the effective meta, but Richard offers to help. Queen Elizabeth arrives, but they really don't want to play with Richard either. And they retreat to the teleporter in a random jump. Vanguard's team arrives and finds Monarch alone, having been abandoned, separated. They also find Purifier. This being a Siren test field that takes place sometime during the OG timeline, Purifier plays nice and guides them to an anchorage where they find Elizabeth. Sheffy brings a rescue fleet and they are joined on the way by Renown and Repulse. They get caught up with each other before getting caught up with Richard. After stalling, they retreat, leaving false coordinates to trick Richard. Afterwards, Hood doesn't die, the Soccer Empire gets Watasumi back, and Marco wants to steal stuff. Speaking of Sardinia, they're throwing a pretty big party. Everyone's invited. All the factions come together, priceless artifacts go missing, Roma goes missing, Bristol runs around causing chaos, Shimakaze runs around causing chaos, Shadano's here. There's even this weird beer seed thing here. The artifact that creates it is destroyed and Roma is freed. Some factions have meetings, and Marco's gone. Oh, Trento's here. Conte needs a raise. Meanwhile, this whole faction war thing in the Soccer Empire isn't resolved yet. Musashi decides to invite both sides over to play some games, and proceeds to rig the hell out of it. Shinano's still at the World Expo in Sardinia, Shogaku's into Ironblood, and with help from a sick fox, they create copies of Siren vessels to be used in the game. And something else. Mikasa and Nagato work as a team, and Musashi leans to Akagi's side. mostly. As their ideologies clash, we're shown the source of Akagi's motivation. Musashi tells Mikasa that the siren showed Akagi her fate along with the rest of the Sakura Empire. Time and time again. When put against a copy of Hermit, Akagi uses the black cube given to her and defeats the Arbiter knockoff when Mikasa and Nagato could not. Musashi worked with Jinsu Meta, our sick fox from earlier, to be able to draw out the power from an origin cube, and in the process made Akagi into pretty much a walking time bomb. She's very much willing to watch the world burn around her, and doesn't care but the use of the black cube is causing her wisdom cube to disintegrate. Jinsu's motivation behind this is a little questionable. Afterwards, Suikaku arrives at Ironblood's floating fortress and meets with a hologram of Bismarck, where she notices what appears to be a copy of Watasumi. Back in the Eagle Union, the commander is back at the Sea of Stars. One of the projects, called the Reality Lens, can give form to thoughts. The commander gets the idea of hooking it up to Anchorage. Anchorage is a special cookie. She seems to have a lot of anomalous data in her hull that won't go away and leaves her precious. She also seems intent on calling the commander teacher. After connecting to Anchorage, stuff goes really wrong and he meets a recording of Anzul, who expresses surprise that the commander was able to reach this point so soon. But they're interrupted and the commander finds himself stuck in his past self's role. He meets Anzul and Alice along with a bunch of other shipbuilders sporting Type 2 riggings. The commander, or the professor, realizes that this technology can help a Kansan with a damaged wisdom cube. Type 2 rigging is the process of using a secondary wisdom cube to strengthen the main. The addition of a second wisdom cube not only greatly increases overall effectiveness, but you can also use the secondary cube as life support so that the first cube can be repaired, so long as it's repairable anyway. An exercise with one of Alice and Tygus models, the Devil, goes awry when it turns out it's actually an Arbiter who has infiltrated the simulation. So the Devil seems to be working with that unknown threat and is acting weird. We see the Dark Winds leaking and Arbiter, the Tower 16, begins to purge the simulation as a result. Memphis and Helena Meta explain that after that tried to attack the commander, they pulled him into the simulation to save him. They also threw in all the info they had on Type 2 riggings and used Tower to simulate the reality. Yorktown buys enough time for the commander to escape. On the way out, we see that this memory was originally a compiler's birth before it was modified. Outside, TB recovers the data from the Type 2 riggings, and the commander uses it to save Yorktown. Lexicon is also mentioned, but we don't see this, so expect that whenever. Or don't. Also hermit crabs. While the Royal Navy is having problems with relics being stolen by an unknown meta, the Vichya retreat from the Kekulin Islands, and the Royal Navy moves in. Argus and Royal Oak go missing, and Implacable leads a rescue fleet. There's a whole lot of red flags. The island's divided up into 4 sections: Blanc, Rouge, Vert, and Noir. Figuring out they went to Blanc after getting attacked, Implacable and Hero start smashing walls down. Richie finds them, and they begin to clean the place out. Originally a research station, the Sirens captured it and built stuff on it, before Iris threw everything they had at them and took it back, losing just about everything, even their shiny new warship. The Tribunal wanted to use Siren tech to produce an army of pawns, but they couldn't control them. They came to a solution that sorta worked, but they had issues with them malfunctioning. Fortunately, they had a system to handle this. Richie and friends use this system to purify the surface, but are drawn to a mirror sea left by the Sirens and beat the Horsemen. Before we go much further, conceptualism is a bit of a complicated topic, but it really boils down to deriving strength from certain ideas or concepts, like judgment. You can use symbolism or faith to strengthen the results. This mirror sea in particular is built around concepts of faith, the Horsemen being based off the Book of Revelation, symbols embodying judgment. According to Richie, they just come back after being eliminated, stronger than ever. If they can defeat them in the reverse order of how the seals from Revelation were broken, however, they believe they could reseal them, eliminating them for good. They set about doing that and stumble upon La Galicineer meta. She says she's Ashes, but they played the system's rules to strengthen themselves. Implacable plays the Queen Elizabeth, and they manage to eliminate the Horsemen. After cleaning out Richie's basement, they all get nightmares of a black sun. Bulwark does too, for some reason. Implacable has a dream. She meets the other Queen Elizabeth. And finally, Hunter and Sheffy Meta are hunting for a whale, but it gets away. They mention a Miss D. So, just a note, the next 4 events happen at roughly the same time, the endings leading into full scales. With Compiler gone, Emitter lacks support. Soyuz launches an operation in the Arctic to take advantage of the situation, dividing her Kansan into task forces. The operation gets off to a good start, even with safety standards being ignored, and Kurskuk was looking for Emitter's mainframe using a Dawn navigation beacon. They end up running into Soyu meta and retreat though. The whole operation is called off as they lose contact with the mainland. Meanwhile, Suikaku's doing research on Watasumi, black cubes, and meteors. Ulrich's nightmares are getting worse, and a call between Lizzie and Bismarck is interrupted by problems at their respective singularity generators, and Liv's leaves her with the warning that using Midgard is dangerous. Bismarck goes to investigate and finds Zoe, Ulrich, and Ganaizenal meta missing, and everyone else in a coma. Midgard's on, and the despite sensing a trap, they go through the activated singularity and get attacked by sirens. Bismarck uses her new Zwei rigging, Garyon, but fails to stop U-556 from being taken by the Black Mist. So Zwei. Zwei is actually different from Type 2. It's a solution made by the Ashes for Bismarck's condition. To explain the difference, it involves strengthening the rigging, not the main cube, so it can draw the meta corrosion away from her and prevent the damage from getting worse. It doesn't do anything to fix the issue of her cube being damaged beyond repair. Bismarck finds Gnai while Ulrich is experiencing meta corrosion, and quickly uses Gary to purify Ulrich. Ulrich was put into a translate state and started all this. Gnai and Zoe went in after her. Gnai says she saw U-556 as a meta going through the teleporter, and they go after her. Looks like they end up in the same spot, but there's a lot more of the corrosion-infused seawater. They find U-556 fighting sirens, and Bismarck snaps her back to her senses. They go through the portal again, and find the siren mainframe, the sirens themselves fighting back the Dark Ones. Zoe recalls a memory from another Mirror Sea when a Shukaku thing in Black Mist tried to attack her, but she heard a chime, found herself under some Toriates, and saw someone that put her at peace before the flashback ends. Going through again, the corrosive seawater flips and starts spreading from the tower. They speculate on the nature of the space they find themselves in. Even more of the evil things begin to spawn, and they find traces of an unknown meta and follow. Finding Vestal meta, who's with Framework, Vesta figures out Vesco's condition, and they team up. They manage to get in contact with Helena meta and exchange info. Hermit was being attacked by the Ashes, and Devil takes advantage of this, setting up a trap using Midgard. She's using it to take control of the space and spread the corruption. Helena has reinforcements, but they need to knock out a minor Hermit vessel first. They do that, and U-556 and Bismarck are both in really bad shape. Gary's completely out of action for a while, and U-556 is having it rough. Arizona Meta arrives and uses Tower to purify the space. Vestal unmetas U-556, and she's not quite past the point of no return, and they part ways as Vestal gets a call from Tower. Bismarck destroys Midgard to prevent it from being used as a way in, but still has no communication with the outside world. We see the Ashes cornering Hermit. They don't get far before Tower's rigging interrupts them. Tower confronts the Devil on Hermit's mainframe, asking who she's working with. Marco decides it's time to start. Richelieu has a nightmare about Marseille. La Terrible tells her it's time to reclaim the crown. Richie wants to go on a grand quest, but LT just tells her to go get it. It's at St. Helena. They near the island and see it's being attacked by enforcers belonging to Devil. They meet up with La Galciniere in Algerie. Richie goes to rescue Marshmallow, who's being attacked by the Black Mist. Marsh throws her the crown, but Richie just drops it and rescues her instead. The visions of the Black Hole Sun continue, and Richie realizes Clemencel's involved. Later, La Terrible and Richelieu use persuasion to get La Galciniere in Algerie to defect. And Richie gets some medicine for her nightmares. Starting off, we're not on the Pulse meta fighting enough shadows around Avalon. Elizabeth shows up, and so does Implacable's fleet, which is weird. Weirder still is that it was Elizabeth that told her to come. Then there's news that Clemencel is coming to the Expo's closing, as is the commander. There's a red flags thrown around. After they're arriving, the commander notices everyone's weird and way too excited. Marco gives a speech, and it's weird and way too excited. Having enough, he interrupts her and blacks out. He sees a vision of the Black Sun and notices there seems to be a massive machine within. Here's the fearing of suffocation, but we hear the... He ends up in a strange realm beneath Torii gates and briefly sees an oddly nostalgic black and red figure. We also meet Shinano, who ends up here quite often. They talk and the commander gets her number. He wakes up. Things are progressing how they did in his dream, but after trying to meet Shinano, they're attacked by giant mecha crabs. They grab Shimakaze and Tsuruga and hide in the Eagle Union's panic bunker, but there's a bunch of these gazer things around. There's comms issues, but the factions get in contact. They end up at the Vitia base since they have that skybound wall thing. They try and figure out what these things are, what that white stuff being spread by them is, and what's going on with the space that encompasses the Mediterranean. Marco shows up on a flying throne wearing the crown of the Holy See, and goes off about the kingdom of God before flying off laughing. Veneto is not amused. Clem shows up with a whole fleet of churches and demands they hand over the Vitia girls. Eugen wants to keep them, but they let them go. Foch questions if they're the baddies. Marco tries to get the Sardinia girls to join, but it goes badly and Veneto takes control. Clem tells John to attack the Expo and excommunicates her when she refuses, then has her attacked. While Malker is waiting for her god to descend, Clem is posing in front of Mount Vesuvius. She betrays Marco, not wanting her brainwashed friend to destroy everything she cares for, and uses a horseman of conquest to shoot her down. Marco takes this poorly. She also orders Crescent to subdue Trento Meta. At St. Helena, the Vitia was studying the micro-layer transportation system that Compiler used, which sorta explains why the Silence can just appear out of nowhere, so Richie uses it to go rescue John Bart. They have a moment, and Richie gathers them all under the banner of a unified Irish orthodoxy once more. After Marco was shot down, stuff goes purple and a black cocoon forms where she sank. A joint Sakura Iris fleet gets drawn into it. After fighting back the nightmares, they're saved by Memphis Meta. Meanwhile, Clemenceau contacts the commander and tells him she had no choice but to go with Marco's plan, while purposely sabotaging it. Richie says we can trust her, so it's probably fine. Memphis Meta shows up, and after a bit of awkwardness, tells us that Helena Meta is slowing down the superimposition of worlds, where a false world is being projected onto the real one, overriding its existence with a fake and bringing the god along with it. Clem has a plan to hijack this concept-based system and use it as a weapon against the god. So the commander coordinates forces to take the multiple nodes used in the system. Weirdly, that one year Andrea goes off without her even getting the order. Memphis mentions anomalies occurring all around the world. Eugen waltzes into Malta, Nelson greets her resentfully. The commander recalls he has Hiryu's number and calls her. She's not doing much but watching the singularity in North Atlantic and talking about how none of them are okay anyway. With everyone's help, they manage to take all the nodes. They all meet at the venue as the weapon called the Spear of Destiny is used against the false god's cocoon, destroying it, but failing to destroy what's within. In front of the monstrosity is a girl. Memphis IDs her as the Arbiter, Hierophant 5, but notes it seems to be something controlling her vessel. But they won't talk about what that is, beyond knowing about it is dangerous. They aren't able to damage it at all, and it speaks. An attack that freezes all ship goals, but is extremely harsh on the metas, but affects the blueprint ships less so. Only the commander and Shinano are completely unaffected. Ryu meta now knows for sure what they're facing and suggests retreating. Clem tries to use the Black Sun to cancel the attack, but the false god uses Hyro's weapon to destroy it. He recognizes Devil's drones supporting it, and things get really bad. Thankfully, Helena Meta shows up, and with help from Tower, takes Devil out of the fight, and cancels the freezing. Ryu recognizes her, but Helena isn't keen on questions. Hierophant rushes the commander, having been watching him. Shinano intercepts, managing to land an attack on it where others had failed. As it reaches the commander, everything goes black. Opening his eyes, Hierophant's next to him, scepter raised. But she freezes upon hearing two familiar voices, which then becomes a conversation. Aust is talking to Ansel about how the desperate state of the War of X has forced the development of a new generation of anti-X, the Arbiters. He introduces Hierophant as the first, despite being the 5th tarot card, but she was built with enhanced communication skills so great she's able to talk with animals, something Aust hoped would help with their efforts. Angel suggests why not use that to talk with X. Aust scoffs, and they turn to him as Hyro looks uninterested. Agreeing with Ansel, Hyro says nothing but a light seems to flash through her eyes. Agreeing with Aust shows that he intends to pay them back in blood before he shuts Hyro down. Either way, it fades away and the commander finds himself back in the Mediterranean. Peace returns as he holds the crown and wonders if it had something to do with all this. Hiryu Meta confronts Memphis Meta and asks her a series of questions, but Memphis refuses to answer them. She asks a second time if Memphis truly doesn't recall her. Helen interrupts them and tells Hiryu to get back to her Ashes mission. The next day, Richie is being crowned. Clemenceau asks Richelieu if she'll take the crown. She accepts the role but refuses the crown, stating the real thing was stolen by sirens and replaced with a tool to exploit them. She destroys it and emits black and red smoke. A few days later, everything was blamed on Marco and the Arbiters. Veneto and Littorio are out looking for Marco, but they get a call from Clem. Littorio overhears Marco is comatose and in Clem's care, but Veneto insists she's been sunk and isn't worth the effort of recovering. Empress reviews the records and determines X was involved. She's unable to say why Hyro didn't destroy her infected vessel, as there's been no contact from her. While the intrusion was stopped early, this world is no longer safe. She reports to Zero. Oh, Richard finds us. So it's been a minute since the whole... And Musashi's having dreams about that. Nagato's also having dreams about withering Sakuras, neither of which are good signs, so they take Shimanto and set out. Had the Great Sage succeeded in destroying the darkness, the barrier should have dissipated on its own. It's weakening over time, yes, but that just implies Watasumi is running out of juice. It's unclear how long it will last, so Nagato prepares a ritual as the old one breaks. Musashi gets taken and the girls are drawn in. The Great Sage eventually finds them and brings them to her safe space. Nagato saves Musashi, and Musashi saves the others while the Great Sage fights her shadow. Seemingly losing, the Great Sage has a conflict with herself before making peace with who she is. Shimanto arrives with rigging made for her and takes the name Unzen, the name used for the rigging. This gives her a new existence as a ship girl beyond the Great Sage. Ibuki and Shimanto stall the monstrosities until only Unzen remains. Unzen releases her all, wounding the beast. It tries to escape, but Nagato finishes the ritual and seals it away once more. The Great Sage fades away. But Unzen wakes up. She observes a figure who should be dead and asks about this, but Ibuki just tells her to ask Amagi herself. Fortunately, we don't have to wait long for answers to that mess. The Eagle Union is having trouble fielding Type 2 en masse, and Lexington is still in bad shape. Elizabeth talks with Elizabeth. Turns out the Kagi buried Amagi's body under the sacred tree, so her soul would linger on, and is intent on taking control of the Watasumi framework. Musashi still wants to build that super weapon. Jinsu Meta questions if that fragment of Amagi is even still Amagi. Yamato, through her trusty telephone, offers Nagato shelter in a panic cave as fire is coming. Trinto gets unmeted, but retains connection to the Venus Comb. Lovers and Empress get orders to hold the line, and Soyuz calls off polar operations as the Dawn beacon they were using to look for Emitter's mainframe breaks. Responsible is what appears to be an aircraft with the description of a certain Arbiter's drone. And so, Princeton touches down at the Sea of Stars, wanting to meet Saratoga or Alaska. Turns out Sarah doesn't work here, and Alaska's out for milk. She and Laffy get into a combat test against a devil simulation, while Guam salvages some abnormal information from a sim of Coral Sea. With Laffy, they're testing Type 2 riggings by simulating them for actually starting construction. With Guam, Constellation thinks it might help Lex. Stella gets a little hasty and plugs it directly into the reality lens. She ends up at the Crown Singularity Alti tried to open. They observe that it's on, which conflicts with their records. They don't really get a whole lot of time to talk about that though, because things go very wrong. Everyone gets run over by the usual devil wanting to tell Princeton something about how the simulated world tech works, before someone contacts her and tells her not to. They all eventually end up somewhere else trying to escape the black storms, except Princeton. But anyhow, they find a damaged beacon and a bunch of sci-fi floating ships that introduce themselves as the Council's 5th fleet. This goes bad before it can get worse, where Protocol Fortress steps in. Or wait, it gets worse because they think she's a siren, but Princeton Meta steps in and that fixes it. After apologies, they end up briefly talking with Silver Fox, who leads the fleet. They get sidetracked dealing with the corrosion and the sirens. Princeton notes the girls are unexpectedly weak. Someone put a limiter in the wisdom cubes to stop the natural metamorphosis at the expense of power. Getting back, Silver Fox and Constellation have a game. They both ask 6 questions and have to answer the same number their opponent answers. Stella goes first. She asks about the flying ships, the Council, X, Anti-X, why they're here, and who she is. Silver Fox does a trick with the last one and ends up with 4 questions answered. Silver Fox goes next and asks about the moon's soil, the Sea of Stars, where they got their wisdom cubes, the Siren hierarchy, if they know about Project Dawn, and about things in Sverdlovsk. Stella declines 1, can't answer another, and as a result of not having an answer to the last one, offers a retry. Silver Fox asks about Oust, and goes dead silent when Stella still can't answer. Princeton interrupts them with the news the beacon is repaired and they get sent back. Someone else saw the beacon's light, but arrived late. In Iris, the commander muses over the report, wondering if he knew Silver Fox and was on the council with the doctors. Huey's introduced to Miss D. Soyuz is breaking her rigging, something to do with a limitation in her cube. Lovers prepares for a long war of attrition. And finally, the council's 5th fleet is still out there. Silver Fox is feeling rather down. Oh, we haven't seen an observer in a minute. She gives a Kaguya formation diagram to act as a manual for using Watasumi in the sacred Sakura system. The name Orochi gets floated for Akagi's plan. Mid-talk, she gets jammed. It's probably nothing. Also, everyone set up for a conference in the newly unified Iris Orthodoxy. Crimson Axis merging back into Azur Lane is considered since everyone's on the same page now. Publicly, the idea is met with a whole lot of indifference. One night, we get mindjacked by our Helena. She tells the commander about a crystal discovered in Antarctica. It can reinforce riggings and can be a real game changer. Problem is, Sarah, desperate to save her sister, found out and is leading a fleet there. He doesn't have the authority to intervene in the Eagle Union's national affairs, but is convinced this is a siren trap to stabilize negotiations. Fortunately, we have Big Brain. First, get Clemenceau. She gets Northern Parliament to think Ironblood found something, and Ironblood to think the Northern Parliament Eagles have. Strasser guesses Observer's mainframe is nearby, so suspicious. And so events. But before that, some Emperor goals mention increasing solar activity as a month-long storm off the coast starts weakening, and a fortune which, and Trento has a foreboding dream. Everyone starts moving. Sarah, however, is building a massive combat fleet, which spooks the commander, cause what does Sarah know? Antarctica, a continent by the Antarctic Treaty, is under Azur Lane. In other words, the commander. Although it's a barren place, so nothing important happens and nobody really cares. Arriving, Soyuz examines the sample. At first, nothing, but then she touches it. Soyuz sees people talking about the creation of a ship that was never finished, herself. Back to reality, Soyuz notices her restructured rigging. After checking in with Ironblood, they move to where the crystal was found, and Soyuz's secret bunker right in the middle of it. Someone broke in and used it. Those crystals? Someone hijacked the assembly line and made them. Finding a tablet, she sees Observer calling for help and starts to put it together. She retreats, but gets caught in a dream of Pamiat, who shows her true face. This Pamiat is living in the past, wanting what she calls an eternal paradise. To Soyuz, it's a cage, and she's heard that before. Pamiat should figure out the first of her 3 goals, then. The commander, with help from his faithful stalker, reestablishes contact, takes command, and puts events together. Palmiat Meta attacked Observer, who used the bunker near her mainframe to attract attention, while Palmiat searched for said mainframe. Sarah, knowing it was a trap but desperate to save Lex, brought the kitchen sink. Having failed to convince Soyuz, Palmiat started another superimposition, but she's winging it and the execution is just terrible. Fortunately, she's very talkative and tells us that Observer disconnected herself from her mainframe, which prevents Zero from getting updates and vice versa. But this leaves her vulnerable. Palmiat then willingly takes damage to get in contact with the Essence, and Soyuz recalls someone else who did this. Still talking, she calls out Soyuz for building the bunker as per Project Dawn, but following a plan whose creator disappeared, got rolled into another project, and ended up with sacrificing everything in the hopes that someone else might succeed. Soyuz insists it could end differently, as Helena Meta confirms that was the truth of the past, but merely a possibility for the future. Palmiat gives off a shockwave as black mist comes through on the commander's side. The commander and Soyuz find themselves before a white door, once more and speculate on it. Then they go through. 3 doors show fragments of her past, a 4th he sees a ship, and a 5th where he meets the collective concept of Palmiat Mercuria, who is curious who the commander is, not just the position. She can't quite recall them, she didn't bring them here, not having that power. The commander asks about the chimes but gets cut off. Snapping back, Palmiat Meta admits defeat, but she isn't beaten yet. Soyuz wants to know what her other goals were, but she just tells Soyuz to help a girl that shares her tragic past before leaving. Later, Observer fights back and Helena Meta explains. Yes, she knew the minerals were fake. Soyuz's problem was fixed by Observer undoing her limiter. She hints at the process of resculpting, but fails to answer at the wind chimes. She also mentions the sun, something Sarah also mentioned, which carries the concept of weakening, which leads to coalescence. And finally, Palmiat Meta tries to break Marco out. It goes badly. Aurora gives the commander plans. Palmiat tries to smash Purifier's mainframe. It goes badly. Elizabeth is with her Meta after asking Miss D her questions and demands to go on a hunt. And Kirov Meta arrives. Shortly after, the Royal Navy gets a whole lot of new metas, and while the 2 Elizabeths are reading news, a doll handmade by Miss D goes off, informing them they have a target. Elsewhere, Observer's pulling all her main forces to Antarctica to cover her, while a new siren installation takes command everywhere else, resulting in a change in tactics and battlefield performance. Also, the Sirens don't want anyone looking into that storm, and Shan and Harbin are told not to care. Previously, Zoe arrived at Mikasa's and found it empty, but she noticed things look a little weird. She sees 2 figures in red and runs after them, crashing into Mikasa, snapping her back to reality. Chalking up to a mental attack, like what happened with Oleg, they go meet Nagato. We also see Akagi in a rather distorted delusion of the past with her sister, and it gets worse as she suddenly finds herself in a sea of red spider lilies. That she wants them to bloom all over is not good. Maybe Jinsu Meta's concern that what was left of Amagi isn't Amagi anymore is just a little on point. Speaking of which, Jinsu Meta and Musashi are about to see Akagi's plan come to fruition, but Zoe and Mikasa want to talk with her, while in Northern Parliament, Kirov Meta finds herself getting babied. And in another timeline, Queen Elizabeth Meta has a train. It's really neat because it uses concept technology. 7 carriages, each of which have their own space, forming a train. They're about to do the hunt thing, but Miss D wants to pick someone up in Site Beta, so QE Meta parks her train in Avalon. In another timeline, the concept of Rodney destroys a Siren test site. Without the basic space supporting it, the matter all folds up into higher dimensions. And then she forms a cocoon in order to descend from the higher planes to our lower planes. The impact gets seen by pretty much everyone. The whale Miss D's actor is drawn to it, the Arbiters decide to investigate, the Ashes naturally won't let them get there first, and another party takes interest. Hadakaze Meta, who is Palmiat's info broker, sets off for her acquaintance, Devil. She's also working with... The commander, meanwhile, is with Helena Meta in that secret meeting space when he loses connection with her and gets stuck. Fortunately, Adora arrives to get him out. He finds Miss D, who turns out to be the reason he got stuck in the first place. And thus, Miss D walks out with Oust's assistant, who's given Iris scars and joined by QE Meta. They take Kmart to the destroyed timeline and use QE Meta's train as an anchor to unfold some of the space out so they can get to the whale inside. They need a concept to connect to it and end up with death. In doing so, the space gets reshaped into a city. But why death? Firstly, it's a concept that appeals to the one responsible for all this. Secondly, it was explained that Miss D is a lot like the commander, an incomplete fragment of a greater whole. The whale is actually her lost rigging, in fact, and it stores a massive amount of information, which is actually why they're all interested in helping Miss D get her whale back. The D in this case, the Arbiter Death 13, who is also quite interesting. To a collective concept, which is what a Kansen truly is, death is just a stage. with each iteration of living and dying adding more fragments to that collection. House designed death around this, the fragmentation of a collection. While QE is out, another fragment of death boards the train, forcing them to run into the city where they find the Ash's investigation team, who feel an odd familiarity with the commander but can't recall him, same as the others. Then, Devil attacks the whale and it flees into the unfolded space again, forcing them to unfold more of the space and move into it. In doing so, the commander meets Concept Rodney, who's just fine staying here. Without Miss D's protection, these higher spaces are apparently pretty dangerous for humans, so she gets us out. As for the ones without convenient transport, death has literally become a way of moving on. Helena Meta also gets here, having used Tower's rigging again. Entering, the space is a memory of X's invasion. We get contacted by Ansel while the two Ashes are reliving this day. The others leave while the commander and Ashes stay behind to watch it happen. Then meet Concept Rodney again. This time she wants to know why he even bothers since it's all a foregone conclusion. She just wants her own end and finds everything pointless. He won't accept that and Rodney becomes interested. She wants to show him something. His end. In a second memory, we get shown the nature of X and why nothing can stop it. The commander tries, but this isn't a fake. There is no fake X, and this Class 9 isn't something that can be stopped. He almost gets taken out when Rodney saves him. She's lost interest in seeing her own end, now wanting to see the end he'll make. Rodney lays down a stage with two different versions of the Iris Girls, and the commander is the key. What we see can only be called a partial awakening. With that power, they easily defeat X. The space ends and they get sent back, dealing with that other fragment of death before the effect ends. While they were fighting, Rodney had destroyed her corrupted cocoon. Harakaze Meta, who corrupted it, takes the fragment, seizes the city, and makes a fake Rodney. She originally wanted the real thing to be born, but even as a fake, it's still overwhelmingly powerful. Helena Meta shows up, not happy that they took the commander and exposed them to X too early, as she puts it. She still isn't keen on questions and wants to take the commander back. The devil joins in, and it becomes a showdown. The commander asks Helena if she could take control of that fake, restoring its connection to Rodney. Helena triggers her resculpting, and Rodney returns as Rodney Meta. Harakaze has to retreat as QE Meta brings Camelot in and purifies the space. Sadly, Devil got the whale. QE Meta and Misty chase after her, leaving Helena Meta to clean up everything. They take Camelot back while the commander and Helena exchange questions. Rodney's fine, she still won't talk about resculpting, especially not how it relates to Memphis and Vestal. Helena in turn is suspicious that QE brought more metas with her. Later, Devil gets jumped and Richard is still trying to get in. After getting left in the dark, Pommian decides to go on vacation. That gets cut short. Later, the Arbiters finally arrive, having been blocked. Temperance concludes that the site has been completely scrubbed and gives only two names that could pull it off: Tower and Magician. They get recalled by Empress to deal with a critical situation. Said situation also makes its way to the commander. The entire Pacific is having an event. And finally, Shinano has a series of dreams. The last with the islands ablaze, ending with a... And that's it for the main story so far. Let's quickly address these events and other forms of media. These hardly matter at the moment, but who knows. Some of the stuff was made by commission authorities or individuals not directly affiliated with Mainstream's writing team, so you can question how canon these are. If everyone's together with the commander and happy, you're here. Collabs, idols, daughter raising, secretaries out in Memphis. Yeah, these don't slot into the event story. It's tempting to say this is just the future of the main story, but it's complicated. Namely, that the events that make up what we call port and the event story as a whole suggests something else entirely. Honestly, what's going on here is up for debate at the moment. Firstly, Event Shinano's dreams take place here, and it's where she learns about the commander. The official JP 5th Anniversary art book tells us this is just a projection of information that ends up in the Cube network than something that actually happens. That seems to be consistent across all versions. Then there's Virtual Tower. A whole bunch of ship goals just happen to stumble into an unknown Siren mainframe's higher dimensional space. You know, as you do. Have no clue what it is, bang on the front door event, and leave. Still waiting for that continuation. Then there's these. Royal Fortune shows up, gives the commander a compass, the commander follows the compass, and ends up in Pirate Land. The Sirens are here because of course they are. There's a neat part about this being in a post-apocalyptic world. The commander gives Royal Fortune the compass. And having learned that they can now just wander around timelines, Royal Fortune continues the cycle. I guess there's the TB daughter sim stuff where we try to give her a personality. Is that important? That's about it for the relevant stuff. The rest of it's just a slice of life and filler, honest. Worth mentioning, the translation for port stuff is pretty much the same across all versions, with no major discrepancies to date. There's the simulation stuff. I think I briefly mentioned how the Sirens run simulations in Mirror Seas. There's reflections of history, but you also have events where just mess around with pawns to try and get an awakening. What else? There's a game, seems alright, never played it. Story-wise, it takes place in its own timeline and doesn't really affect anything. There's an anime, 2 now, since Queen's Order's got an OVA. Both are slice-of-life adaptations of the respective comics and are set in port. Azur Lane, the animation, is in the same boat as the game, but unlike the game, there is a lot of stuff that carries over. Or the other way around, I don't know. Hi, I'm Full Flow. This started, if you believe, in early 2023. Pretty rough, yeah. Thank you to all the people who put up with me, and thanks for watching.